Hello, all of our viewers. I'm so excited. I'm Michelle Ward, and I'm here, as you can see, with Hannah Brandt and Ann Lewis. They have their names right up top, so we know who's who. And this is the August installment of Grown Up Gigs, an inside look at dream jobs held by real people. And we took a break for July, and I missed you, and I missed Grown Up Gigs, and now we're back for August. And Hannah and Ann are both CPAs who work separately and work together. So I figured this could be like a grown-up gig double whammy, where not only do we get to hear their own stories and how they found their way to accounting and to doing this work for themselves, but also they're available for you to ask your questions about money, finances. So as, you know, entrepreneurs, creative people running your own businesses, I know a lot of you, feel free to use that submit question button and ask a question, and I'll be able to see it on my screen. And we're going to take a break, probably like 3-ish times during the hour that we're here to answer questions. So please submit them as they come to you, and we will answer them accordingly. Very exciting. I'm looking at some of the comments, and Derek, there's nothing to pick. Pick me, please. We're not bringing anyone on camera at all. So if anyone has a question that comes up, again, use the submit question button. Otherwise, yeah, that's it. That's it. And otherwise, nothing. That's your only option. So Hannah and Ann, could you guys, little introduction, let people know. Oh, you guys could find me at whenIgrowupcoach.com. Hannah, why don't you go first? Let people know where they could find you, and also give us a little bit of backstory in terms of what you wanted to be when you grew up and how you found your way to what you're doing now.
Well, hello, my name is Hannah, and you can find me at hannahbrandt.com. That's my brand new website. I just finished it. And I guess the funny thing is, when I was little, when I was asked that question, I always said I wanted to be a babysitter when I grew up. But because I always looked up to my babysitters and I thought they were so cool. But anyhow, when I was in college, I started working in restaurants, and I would always end up doing the bookkeeping, and then I worked for various different types of businesses where I would always end up in the back doing the bookkeeping, and I finally decided maybe I should take this a little further. So I went back to school, and I got a job at a CPA firm, which is where I met Ann, and spent some time there. I was a little bit unhappy working in the firm, doing the 9 to 5, which is when I contacted you. And ultimately, what I decided to do was go out on my own and start my own practice, which I did about a year ago.
Hey! Big leap, big scary leap. Was it big and scary?
It was. I mean, it still is at times, you know. Yeah, it was scary. But it's worth it when you know that you're living the lifestyle that you want to live and you're not unhappy in a soul-sucking job.
Amen and hallelujah. Get an amen. It's nice for you to pinpoint it that way. I think you articulated that really well. That it's about lifestyle, and sometimes it's about figuring out what you want your lifestyle to be, and then kind of figuring out what will give you that, as opposed to sometimes people try to figure it out the other way around. Great.
Yeah.
Fabulous. And Anne, could we ask you the same questions?
Yeah, so you will be able to find me at annlewiscpa.com, but not for another week or so. And it won't be a fantastic website, but at least you'll have contact information. So annlewiscpa.com. I found my way. I think it took me a lot longer than it did Hannah. I think that I was scared for much longer. So I stayed working in various office jobs, just seeing myself get more and more unhappy. What did I dream of when I was growing up? Lots of different things, and usually it was something creative. you know, I wanted to be a photographer. I wanted to be some kind of designer. I mean, I had every imaginable dream. When I went to school, I studied art history, and I thought I was going to work in a museum. And out of college, you don't really find work unless you have a PhD. I mean, just imagine, I've tried every little avenue, and finally, along the way, I was working in marketing cosmetics for different cosmetic brands, and I realized that I liked working in business, but I wanted to see the big picture. You know, I liked marketing. It's creative, it's fun, it's like free cosmetics. It was fantastic, but it wasn't for me, like for the long term. When I imagined working for the next 30 years, you know, for L'Oreal and just stressed out and unhappy, that didn't really make sense. And I also liked the idea of a profession where maybe I don't want to live in New York City my entire life. Maybe I want to be able to go to upstate and just have my own little business in Timbuktu, who knows where, you know? And I saw sort of public accounting as a way of achieving that, the sort of the flexibility or the mobility that having this profession provides. And so I went to graduate school, got my master's in accounting and MBA, and then became a CPA and proceeded to work at various firms. And Hannah's firm in Santa Cruz was one of the last ones, but I tried a fair number before I gave up. And same with Hannah, there are days where it's really scary, you know, now that I've taken the leap. But it's so worth it, you know. It's a small price to pay just to be happy every day.
Mm. Oh, I feel like that's a tweetable. It's a small price to pay to be happy every day, and it rhymes, which I love. I'm a weirdo. So, how long have you been working for yourself, Anne?
Almost a year. It was October that I quit my last job, hopefully ever.
So you guys are both like newlywed entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Yes.
In a way. You could kind of phrase it that way. Are either of you able to articulate like the turning point and what really made you take a look in the mirror and say, I do not want to be going to this office anymore. I want something different for myself. I'm going to do the things that'll help me make that leap.
Hannah, do you want to go?
Well, for me, for the firm that we worked at in Santa Cruz, well, and our specialty is tax. So it was, you know, during tax season this past, I guess it was tax season 2012, right? Yeah.
11.
And, you know, tax season is just hellish. And I just remember, like, I was having meltdowns on, like, a weekly basis, sometimes more than once a week. And I was just really unhappy. And I would dread going to work every day. And I finally, it sort of happened organically because I started having discussions with my boss about being unhappy and feeling like I needed a little break. And it wasn't actually a clean break. I talked to him, letting him know that I was struggling and I wasn't happy and I needed to take some time off. And he, you know, gave him the option of either me taking a little leave or I would just give my notice. And he was open to me taking the leave. So I took a month leave. And during that time is when I really realized, oh my gosh, I feel so much better not going to that job every day. I can't go back.
Oh, so what happened after that month?
So after that month, I just went back in and met with him and let him know that I wasn't coming back, and he was fine with it. And I think I moved a little bit slowly. I mean, I started. I was actually considering getting out of accounting completely. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. But I realized that I did want to help people. I did enjoy helping people get their accounting affairs in order. So right around, this was like in June when I took my leave. And so right around August, I started seeking out small businesses to see if they needed bookkeeping help and brainstorming ideas of how I could build a tax practice for the following tax season, which is this past year, this 2013 tax season.
Wow, that's great. So there was definitely, it seems like you knew that sounds like you were compromising your health and your sanity in a way, hearing about the meltdowns and then just knowing, waking up in the morning, feeling not good about what you were doing. It
Yeah.
takes a lot of guts to go back in after that. They give you that month and be able to say, I'm not coming back, and knowing that it's then up to you to kind of build this up.
Yeah, I mean, I remember feeling really nervous about it, but it's one of those things that you feel so nervous about it ahead of time, like, oh my gosh, what is he going to think of me? Does he think I'm taking advantage of him? But once it's over, and I think he reacted quite nicely. But even if he hadn't, it's all in the past, and you just move on. So.
Yeah, fabulous. And did you have a similar turning point? Or just a time when you knew, like, I need to put the wheels in motion to leave?
Yeah, I'll give you just like a little bit of backstory and then I'll tell you the moment. So before I went to graduate school, I was working in cosmetics, like I said, in New York City, but I took a bookkeeping job for a photographer, a commercial photographer, who had a studio down in Chelsea, and he just needed some help. He's a friend, like an ex-boyfriend of a friend type of thing. And I realized that I really liked it, that I'm sort of organized in that way. It wasn't, I don't think normal people dream of becoming accountants. I'll just say that.
It wasn't what you wanted to be when you grew up.
Who dreams of that? I mean, I do remember having yard sales growing up, and I really wanted an adding machine, but that's as close as I can come to ever even thinking of being an accountant when I was a kid. But I remember doing bookkeeping for this guy, and I remember that in contrast to working in a high rise on Fifth Avenue, I just loved the feel of the studio, and I loved how sort of casual it was, and I loved how there were all kinds of other crazy artists, working on other floors, and it was just really inspiring. And so my initial dream was not to become an accountant working in some big firm or even a small firm like the one we were at in Santa Cruz. It was really to have my own consulting business, basically doing bookkeeping or something like that for artists. I mean, that was my dream, and this is going back maybe 12 years ago or something. And so then when I went to graduate school, what happens is you get kind of sucked into this game that you didn't even want to be a part of, and you're working for these firms sort of. It's not that they ever offered me Kool-Aid. I think they put it in the air or something, and all of a sudden you have had a sip or two of the Kool-Aid, and you're convinced that you can't do it on your own, even though initially you knew you could, because that was what I wanted to do, meaning just get my degree and then have my own consulting business. And so, I stayed in it for, I guess, 8 years altogether, starting at a very, very big firm and then progressively going smaller, or no, going drastically smaller and then going in the middle, thinking I'm going to find the right firm, the right fit. The truth is that I always wanted to be my own boss. I always wanted to have my own business. That much I can say. Like, no matter what dream I had, it was that I wanted to be in charge. I wanted to decide what I was going to do every day, if I could take a walk in the middle of the afternoon because it's a gorgeous day outside. I mean, I wanted that control. And so the turning point for me was finally getting to that last job at that last horrible firm for some horrible men. And I was so miserable, and I say men. I mean, I'm sorry, but it's true. And
I hear you.
I'm sorry?
No, I was saying, I hear you. I know what you mean.
And I was reading a New Yorker on my way to work, just commuting into Times Square, and I was reading this article about this architect, this Danish architect who had started a firm here in New York City, and just reading about his philosophy, his beliefs, and all this stuff. And I realized that, well, he has an office in Copenhagen, but he has this office in New York City. They must need an accountant. Was in my mind, like, if he's got a 100-person architectural firm, why not? So I that night I promised myself, because I was so unhappy. I mean, truly, like, coming home with just headaches. I don't get headaches, but I was just like, oh God, this is painful, working for these jerks. And so I write this email, stayed up until like 2 o'clock in the morning writing this email from the heart. I mean, like, I put all that I had into this email, saying, I read this New Yorker article, I love what you do, I love this building you designed, blah, blah, and I get a response. And so not only do I get a response, the next day, they were coming from Denmark and they wanted to meet me, and I go for the interview. And it was down at that Martha Stewart building, the Lehigh Starite building or whatever that is, over in Chelsea.
I was there a few weeks ago for a conference. It was unbelievable.
It's such a cool building. And this is the thing, like I knew a photographer who had a studio there back in the day, and just going back to that building, that energy, there's an incredible energy in that building. So there I was coming from my, high-rise office-y building in Times Square, going to this like really just cool building with all kinds of crazy photo shoots going on and blah blah. So I go to this interview and I'm just alive again. I feel like night and day, the difference, just changing that little bit of my environment. And I'm just going for the interview. Well, I bombed the interview, bombed it. And I was so near tears walking out of it. I mean, I don't normally bomb an interview, but this one was just like, like I couldn't say the right thing. I couldn't explain how in the world I was working at these accounting firms for so many years. And so basically that was my moment. I was like, what have I done? How did I end up? Like I've gone so far, I've worked so hard, but yet I'm not even able to do what I've dreamed of doing. That was it.
Oh my God. It seems like there's a lot of similarities too in both of your stories. And I hear you in terms of like, this was never a childhood dream, but it seems like you both were so connected to certain lifestyle aspects and working with certain people in certain ways, which is also why I think we connected. And when Hannah, you reached out to me and introduced me to Anne and started talking to me about what you guys are doing now, I went like, oh, yes, like let's get you. And I think you wanted to post on my blog, and I was like, could I interview you for Grown Up Gigs instead, or in addition? Like, I'd still love to have you on the blog, but it's exciting for us as creative business owners to find other left brain people that get us and want to work with us, and are women too. No offense to the men, but I think there's a key, relationship piece and communication piece that really just comes along as well.
Yeah.
So in terms of the types of people that you guys work with now that you've been in your own businesses for about a year, both of you, who do you find that you're working with, and who are you kind of proactive about getting as clients? Because it sounds like both of you definitely approached people in a very proactive way.
Yeah, I go.
Yeah, well, I work with a lot of small local businesses here in Santa Cruz, mostly retail and restaurant. That seems to be the businesses that I'm drawn to and that are drawn to me. And then as far as tax goes, I work with a lot of young couples or young single people who maybe have, a little more complexity to their returns than they used to in the past. Maybe they're not just W-2, they have their own business and they're not quite sure how to report certain items, or they just bought a house, or various things that can complicate your tax return. And I think it helps give them confidence to be working with somebody, because I know when I used to do my own tax returns before I went back to school and studied tax, learned about tax, I was so lost. I was just like blindly filling things in, hoping that it was somewhat correct and not really understanding. So I know it would have made a big difference if I had sought out the help of somebody that did know. So those are the type of people that I like to help.
I always say that I became the When I Grow Up coach because I needed the When I Grow Up coach at the time, and there wasn't a When I Grow Up coach. So I feel like I'm hearing something similar, that you wanted to be the CPA or the person to help with the taxes, and you needed that before you became the CPA, and now you're providing that service for people.
Right, and I think there's this sort of stereotype of the small business or individual tax accountant that's sort of this old, staunchy gentleman, and so I think it's refreshing to have younger people and women working in the profession, and I think that my clients enjoy that,
Yeah,
someone they can relate to more.
Absolutely. So. And what about you?
My clients, they're a bit of a mix actually now. I mean, over the years, I guess I worked in London for a little while, so I developed a little bit of an international expertise, and so a lot of my clients have like, cross-border things going on, whether they maybe own maybe a foreign partnership or something like that. I mean, where it's a little bit maybe more complex, but just plain American, nothing foreign. It might be a local photographer who's just a Schedule C, meaning he's a sole proprietor. I also have a consulting, a marketing consultant. It's almost not by industry. It's by I think it has more to do with just whether or not you can relate to the person and vice versa. Whether they feel comfortable, reaching out and knowing that they're going to understand what it is you're saying, and vice versa. It's important for the CPA to know that they're dealing with someone who's on the up and up and wants to be honest and do the right thing. And it makes our jobs easier if we're working with someone who's ethical. It helps.
Always.
And if they're organized, that's great too. But I think both Hannah and I realize, in working especially with small businesses, a lot of it is an education too. It's so helpful to have the relationship before the tax season, to have that initial meeting just to plant seeds of, this is how you can organize your business, and this is how you can think about these things, and this is how you can, keep track of your books, and I think that relationship, it helps the business person for sure, but it also just reinforces the relationship. And so, as opposed to kind of a stereotypical client, I can't say I have one. It's more like I respond to the personalities and stories. I like the stories that people bring, and yeah, no.
I love that. I mean, sometimes it's not, so niche, but you just have a sense of these are the types of people are here, their common personality traits, or here's, who I enjoy working with. Let's take a little question break because Jennifer submitted a question, and I encourage everyone to use the submit question button. And then I'll see your question, and you can do that at any time. So Jennifer said, I've been using Outright because it was the least scary for a little over a year now, and this year I found sections that are listed as non-business. Now that I'm in August, I can't figure out what these are or if they're still being added in there, and it's just all very confusing. So I guess maybe the question that Jennifer wants to ask is, what's that non-business section? And should she maybe be tracking anything that counts as non-business that she doesn't know about?
Yeah. Do you want me to answer? Okay.
Have you used Outright before?
No, but I figure it's like a QuickBooks type of thing.
Yeah,
Okay,
I think so. I'm not familiar with Outright.
Outright's kind of like Mint. Do you guys know Mint?
Yeah, I definitely know Mint.
So it's basically the easier, prettier QuickBooks, that everything is in the cloud, and you log in, and you're able to bring in, here's my checking account, here's my savings account, here's my PayPal account, and can categorize your income and your expenses. Okay. And I guess Jennifer is asking, should I just do things by hand again? Like, what's the most effective way of keeping track of your business income and expenses?
I mean, I think it's whatever works. I mean, whatever is not going to intimidate you, whatever you're going to feel, comfortable using is what you should use. I mean, I was just telling Hannah the other day that for my business, I'm actually keeping track of everything in Excel. And I should actually be embarrassed about that, but it's like, it works for me. And I mean, maybe I'll switch over to QuickBooks. I probably should, but for now, Excel is fine. The most important thing, though, is what you're tracking. And so I think that's Jennifer's question, this non-business. Basically, what Outright is trying to capture is, what did she spend out of her checking account, or whatever bank account she's logging here? What expense was not actually related to her business? And I think it's important. I don't know Jennifer's line of work, her industry, and we couldn't possibly get into everyone's specific industry, but you need to put yourself in kind of the shoes of an auditor and think, okay, if an auditor were looking at my business, what would he say is ordinary and necessary? And if I can like seriously look this person in the face and say, yeah, that was an ordinary and necessary expense for my business, whatever that business is, whatever that industry is, then that's a business expense. There are limitations, you know, and that's the sort of thing you would want to, you know, probably have a conversation with at least some kind of accountant, if not a CPA. So the non-business expenses, basically, I don't know if you're if you're a CPA, right? If you're a CPA, it would not be normal for me to go to the spa. I mean, that's just not an ordinary or necessary expense for running a CPA practice, you know? So I think a lot of it is common sense. But back to Jennifer's question, I think all they're wanting to do is say, okay, what cash came out of your bank account that had nothing to do with your business? Would you agree, Hannah?
Yeah, so I don't know if Outright is automatically categorizing some expenses as non-business. That I see that you commented that you really only use your business accounts for business-related things. So maybe it would be miscategorizing something as non-business. And again, that's hard to say without knowing exactly what it's putting in the non-business account. But
Okay,
if it is all business expenses, it would probably need to be recategorized to a business expense.
and Outright, can you just go in and recategorize? Can you just, maybe, is there a drop down box, right? Yeah. So
There used to be, yeah, you can. Okay, I was on Outright as of until last year, late last year, and sometimes it does miscategorize. It like picks something up, and it's like is a gas station, and you're like, no, this is a restaurant, but you're able to recategorize. So Jennifer says when there's like 20 no-name things, it's hard to figure it out. So playing with that, I think it would be really helpful to hear from both of you in terms of what you would recommend to help us new entrepreneurs set up our expenses and start working in our numbers, especially with people like Jennifer and myself who are scared of all the numbers and intimidated of all the numbers. Is there some sort of quick and easy, less painful way of setting things up for yourself when you're first starting out?
Well, I mean, I agree with what Anne said earlier. It really is what works for you. But like in Jennifer's case, where maybe, I mean, I don't know exactly how she feels, but maybe she's getting a little overwhelmed with Outright because there's all these no-name things and she doesn't know how to recategorize them. So maybe that's not the right system for her. So back to her original suggestion, should I just go back to manual? I mean, I think that's often the best place to start, unless you have just oodles and oodles of accounting, transaction, and activity. I think Excel or any other similar program is a great place to start organizing your numbers. And you can just do simple columns or rows and saving, you know, I think the most important thing is saving your receipts and tracking your income. And as long as you can do that in some form in Excel, I mean, maybe it's even easier to do pencil and paper, some form of organization there. As long as you're able to track it and organize it, I think that that's a great place to start for somebody starting their own business.
Right.
yeah, and I would just add that it's like just staying on top of it is, I think, what would help anyway. I mean, if you can just every week, or I mean, I know that for me, if I have a business expense, I'll, you know, make sure I pull out the receipt right away. And maybe it doesn't get into my Excel workbook right away, but it'll sit on the top of my desk until I add it to my Excel workbook, which is basically, I mean, it's so simple. I have one tab that's expense and one tab that's income, and I have another tab that's home office, right? So this is like my home office, this little room here. And so the expenses, I have basically, you know, if you imagine Excel, just the rows that go down are just like the additional expenses. The columns that go across are like the date, who I paid the expense for, and then I have them sort of grouped, you know, and I just add rows as, I mean, like I'm telling you, it is so simple, and I should be embarrassed as an accountant to say I'm doing it this way, but it works. And so basically I have my major groupings, so like dues and subscriptions, or meals and entertainment. What else do I have? Like insurance cost, or, you know, all my various like major categories. And then I just add on rows every time I have a new expense. And then as soon as I put that receipt in the Excel, then it goes into a plastic folder. I mean, nothing fancy. and it's there. It's not particularly organized. It's probably somewhat chronological, and the most recent stuff would be on top. But that works for me, and it doesn't give me a headache. I don't dread it. It's like it's in 1 or 2 receipts at a time. And I would suggest just listen to yourself. Like whatever you're going to respond to, that's what you should do. So if outright is overwhelming you or intimidating you just by the way it's wanting to organize your stuff, I'd say just go simpler, whether it's by hand or Excel. Whatever works.
Right. And it seems like Jennifer added that she's doing that for her sales, pencil and paper, it's easier for her to keep track. But yet in outright, she's just praying that my expenses keep putting themselves in outright, which is funny. And so it seems like what we're really saying is like, if it's easier for Jennifer, and it sounds like it's easy to track her sales with pencil and paper, then do the same thing to stay on top of your expenses. And I totally second you have to stay on top of it. Nothing is worse. I have a friend who like does all of her tax stuff, and even just putting everything together, income, expenses, at the end of the year for the whole year. And I was like, I don't understand. And finally, like she even had enough of it and went, oh, I'm going to hire an accountant and I'm going to, send them something quarterly. And I do it every week. And if it doesn't happen every week, it happens every other week where I'm logging my income, I'm logging my expenses. And then at the usually first business day of the next month, I'm looking at the prior month and like running reports and seeing what sold and what didn't, blah, blah, blah. Oh, and Jennifer just asked what I use. I actually use QuickBooks, not online, and I've been using it since January, and I do not like it.
You're using online or not online?
Not online. Not online. So it's on my desktop, and I don't know. And I'd love to hear your take on this as your business sort of grows, and you have more things that you're offering, and you're making more money, and things get a bit more complicated, especially in a business like being a coach or an artist. Jennifer's an artist, and you just have a lot of different things to keep track of. It's like a lot of different products and services, and then expenses. I thought I needed I was like leveling up. I was like, okay, I'm gonna learn QuickBooks. I'm gonna use QuickBooks. I don't think I learned it as well as I should. So it's not working as robustly for me, and I'm running reports that are helpful, but it's certainly not. I feel like so much better than when I was outright. So do you guys have any thoughts on like once things start to grow and you have more things to keep track of? I love hearing, Anne, that like you're a pen and you're an Excel person. I was like, oh, I could really do it that basic.
Well, but I mean, Excel is one of those things though. It's a pretty amazing software. I mean, you can do incredible. I mean, you can basically make a cake with Excel if you have the right. It's amazing. And so like I'm using it very simply, but you can do all kinds of functions to run reports if you wanted to. But you'd have to be an Excel wizard, to take it that far. I'm thinking that QuickBooks is really the best thing you can do for a small business. I mean, you might not love it, and as an accountant, I don't think anyone who's trained in accounting loves QuickBooks, right, Hannah?
Yeah, I mean, QuickBooks is kind of like, it's like the accounting standard for small businesses, but I think that a lot of people do get frustrated with it, both accountants and, users who aren't necessarily accountants, small business owners. It can be frustrating, but it is sort of the standard of a small business. And I mean, I've been using QuickBooks for many, many years, and I happen to like it a lot. So, but
you use it well.
I do understand the frustration.
Yeah. But you've been doing it for so long too that like if you know how to use the classes and you I'm going to stop there. Use the classes. Like you can have incredible reports. And super useful for knowing like how successful was this project and what went wrong and how am I going to, maybe create better quotes in the future. I think QuickBooks can do all of that for you, but it's a matter of knowing how to enter the numbers correctly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Any QuickBooks resources, Hannah? Like, did anything help you wrap your head around it and be able to utilize it?
I think what helped me, because I kind of had interesting experience. I learned QuickBooks on the job before I had any sort of accounting training. So I didn't really understand accounting, double entry, anything like that. I just knew how the QuickBooks software worked, and it worked. And I think that can be frustrating because you sort of kind of trust what you're doing, but you're not so sure that things are going where they're supposed to go. But you have this routine, what you do when you log into QuickBooks every time, and that's what you do. But I think the turning point for me for when I got really familiar with QuickBooks was taking an accounting class. And I know that not many artists want to delve in and take an accounting class, but if there's some sort of, I know that here we have SCORE, it's like I think they have it, I think it's a national organization where you can reach out to certain mentors, and just if you can sort of educate yourself with some sort of workshop on the general workings of accounting, I think that can help a lot with the understanding of QuickBooks. And same thing, like I think a lot of SCORE type businesses might have a little QuickBooks workshop that might be helpful. So I know that's not like really the greatest solution for many people, but I think
it's not the funnest thing, but right, that makes sense. That totally makes sense.
Yeah.
I'd love to just kind of change course a little bit and talk about how you guys came together and now are working together in different capacities, and are really kind of, I don't know, is collaborating the right word? It seems like you're joining forces for some clients and different different things that you're doing. So could you talk a little bit about how that came to be?
Do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'll start at least. I think part of being in any profession is well, part of working in any organization is the exchange of ideas and just thinking through something in a team or with someone else, so you're not kind of in your own little mind creating something that's just not going to work and doesn't make sense. And so I think that when you're working in a firm, that's the scariest, or one of the scary things. It's not just financial. It's leaving that network of people, of other minds that you can sort of rely on and just bounce an idea off of. And so I think that when Hannah and I worked together in Santa Cruz, we had a really nice working relationship. I think that we both had mutual respect, which is not every day that you find that in an office. And I think that, we had similar maybe working styles and communication styles. And so that just kind of adds to just our, I don't want to say chemistry, but, just when you click with someone, and it's like, yeah, I think we just liked working with each other. And so, so basically when we were coming to our own conclusions or decisions to move on, sort of, I think it's coincidentally, really. I mean, I'm here in New York now, and we both kind of came to the decision to go on our own. And it was like we just, because we already had a working relationship and a friendship that had developed, it just seemed like a natural extension that we would then be in pretty regular communication about, a question that we have on a client, or, can I borrow this resource, or, and it just felt like a natural way to support each other. Did I cover? Hannah, you fill in all the blanks that I missed.
That pretty much covered it. Yeah, I mean, it's just so nice. I mean, for me especially, I don't have as many tax seasons under my belt as Anne does. And so that was another piece that was really scary for me going out on my own, because when I worked at the firm, I sort of had the firm at my back. I could always ask my boss, or when Anne was still there, I could ask Anne, am I doing this right? Is this the right process? And so it's just nice when you're dealing with complex issues and people's finances to be able to bounce situations off of a colleague, and know that, you know, the course of action that you're taking is the correct course.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think that.
And then how did oh, go ahead, Anne.
Oh, I was just going to add that it's bouncing ideas, and then I think the other piece is like having someone else's eyes look at something. You know, we may have run into a couple just complicated returns where it was like, you know, can you just take a look at this? Or I remember sending a spreadsheet to you, Hannah, where it's like, you know, can you just make sure I didn't miss a formula? Because it happens. You know, it's nice to have a second set of eyes and the mind attached to it too. So.
yeah.
It's so nice to hear, because it sounds like it's a partnership in a way, like not legally or officially, or like the clients don't know that it's this partnership, but behind the scenes, you know, there's someone that's available to you to be your sounding board and your proofreader, and you know, have these different roles for both of you, which is great. How did it come to be that you guys decided to like email me and say, can we do something together, and start, like, is that a new kind of marketing piece that you're working on?
Yeah, I mean, I think we, you know, after our first tax season on our own ended back in April, things slowed down for us, and we were sort of putting our heads together as to how we could work on projects that might help generate income either during tax season or outside of tax season, or just even how we can reach out to more people who are struggling with accounting, even if it's not necessarily generating income, but just making more connections. And since we both really enjoy, you know, like Anne was saying, her dream originally was to work with artists, and I really enjoy working with small businesses, and I just thought that, wow, like, you know, I really enjoyed working with you as a career coach, and that you work with so many creative types starting their own businesses, so it could be a good little niche to connect with some of that community.
And I think too, like, just having gone out on our own, we know how scary it is, and we're accountants. Like, we understand the numbers, and we understand like entity formation. We understand sort of all of those really intimidating things, I would think. I mean, if you're, you know, always an employee and you just always kind of draw that paycheck, it's daunting to take that step. And I think both Hannah and I think down deep, I know that I want to help people take the plunge and live a happier life. And, you know, if it's a creative person, that's fantastic. If it's not a creative person, that's also okay. But just help people find comfort in their financial life, you know. So yeah, I think when Hannah proposed, or she introduced me to your website, I looked at it, and it's like, yeah, you have an audience that appeals to both of us, and that, you know, these are people doing things that we think are really great.
I just thank you for all of that kind words. I appreciate it. And I think it's interesting, because I think that I haven't seen it in a lot, where two people in the same industry kind of pair up and approach the people that they want to connect with, or the people they want to reach out to and potentially have as clients or whatever, without it being some official thing, if that makes sense. So I know of like pairs of people that are saying, I'm putting together this program, or I'm starting this business together, or I'm running this conference and we're doing it together as a partnership. But I think it's just a really fantastic kind of new, different idea for any entrepreneur to kind of think about, where they could decide, let's go to someone else that's in my industry, who I have this wonderful rapport with, who is my sounding board and my proofreader and all these other things, and like, let's go together. It makes it a lot less scary and probably a lot more fun in approaching people, and what could be a real kind of scary, unfun thing to do.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I want to just encourage everyone that is still hanging out live to submit questions because we have 15 minutes left, and we'll just keep talking. But I'm happy to stop and address all of the questions that come through. So Jennifer, even if you have more questions, it's not like have your question allotment. Just use that submit question button, and it'll pop up, and then I can put it on the screen.
I'm reading her comment though. She says, "I love how you don't like using it, but you recommend it." I think she's talking about me with QuickBooks. There's no other choice though. I mean, that's really, like Hannah said, it's the gold standard of small business, right? What is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, really. Could you guys talk a bit about incorporation? Because that's something that my clients really struggle with, and I think any sort of new business owner. How do you know when you should be a sole proprietor versus an LLC, and that sort of issue that comes up?
Sole proprietorships or Schedule Cs, the way tax accountants would talk about that form of doing business, is by far the most popular way of doing business in the U.S. I mean, by far. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but you know, most small businesses are doing it as a sole proprietor, as a Schedule C. Now, why do you incorporate? I mean, I think a lot of people get sort of so excited about starting their own business. It's like a part of making it official, like you incorporate and therefore you are, and I really don't believe it's necessary in most cases. I mean, back to the point, most small businesses are sole proprietorships, which are not, I mean, that's just you. I mean, both Hannah and I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but I think you're a sole proprietor. I mean, I'm a Schedule C. I mean, I'm not incorporated.
Yeah.
You might say, okay, what about asset protection? What about liability coverage? Isn't that why people incorporate? Well, it is sometimes, but you have to look at your industry, look at what you're doing, and look at your own personal situation. So, okay, my industry, professional services, what covers me is really a good liability insurance. A professional liability insurance is what I have, and that's what I would advise to most people who want to put themselves out there, want to make sure that they're protecting themselves against a lawsuit from a client who's unhappy. You never know when something like that could happen, but you don't need to be necessarily incorporated for that kind of protection. The downside to incorporating, I mean, it does offer you the liability protection, but all of a sudden you've got all of these fees. I mean, you've got all this additional cost, and when you're starting up a new business, the last thing you need to worry about is doing a corporate tax return and even just the incorporation itself, like paying a lawyer to do that, or maybe you go on LegalZoom or whatever there is online and you do it yourself. But if you go to an attorney, you're going to spend at least $1,000 probably to get your corporation registered or your LLC. So for me, it just seems like an unnecessary cost in most cases. If you're creating, though, let's say that you're going to sell a cream, like an SPF cream, and there's a real possibility that something could go wrong. I mean, someone puts that on their face and they just, I don't know, they have some horrible reaction. And that's a real risk. And yeah, sure, there's where you probably would want to incorporate. I should just say right now, though, I am not an attorney. Just as I said that, I thought, I'm not an attorney. I shouldn't be giving legal advice, but I do think, generally speaking, the businesses we're talking about here are, creative businesses where, probably a Schedule C is more than enough. What else can we add to that, Hannah?
Yeah, I mean, I think you pretty much covered it. Where it's just added expenses that you don't need and added filing requirements. Lots of times there's information statements that you have to file and pay a franchise. I mean, I know in California you pay at least $800 franchise fee each year. So
yeah,
it has to be. something that's really worth incorporating, not just sort of like, oh, I'm just formalizing my business a little bit more.
Yeah. And I think more often than not, that's what it is. It's like, it's just that initial excitement of, oh my gosh, I'm starting my own business. You know, I need, you know, business cards, a website, and to incorporate, you know, and it just, I think that's all I would want to say is just think about it before you go ahead and do it. And maybe it is worth having a couple conversations with professionals. Those professionals would be a CPA who can talk to you about your specific situation, you know, meaning, know what are your assets? I mean, what do you own? Do you even have anything to lose? I mean, that's a basic question, but it's worth asking. And then maybe meeting with an attorney, just to see, you know, what are your risks really in the business that you're endeavoring to take on. But you know, for most people, if you're just doing a little, you know, design service, consultancy service, probably a Schedule C is really truly the way to go.
So I'm an LLC. And now I'm going, why am I an LLC? And I thought it was because I own my apartment. And so since I own my apartment with my husband, if someone sues me, they can't touch my apartment. Is that a false belief? I hope not.
No, you know, you try to think about also like what is it that you're doing? Like if you're an LLC and you're the only person working, so you're a single member LLC, you're the only member of this LLC, presumably, right? And so, you know, if someone had a problem with your LLC, arguably they had a problem with you because you're the only person in that entity. Different when you're talking about like a huge corporation. Yeah, you know, someone could have an issue with the product, but that corporation is comprised of so many people, and there are so many different players that go into creating that product that it would be really difficult to sort of associate the problem with a person. Whereas with you, unfortunately, I mean, it's if there's an issue, it's you, right? So I think that that's where, and again, I'm not an attorney, but I think that if someone really had a problem with something that you know, under the name or under the you know, umbrella of your LLC did, I don't know that legally you're that protected, really. Again, I'm not an attorney, but you know, I think I don't know. Am I making sense, Hannah?
Yeah, and I like what Jennifer wrote here. Well, that's scary, and I think that is scary because that's what I feel like we're told in a lot of different places as new entrepreneurs and how to set up your business. And the LLC is for people that own property, and as long as like you're an LLC and it's worth the extra fees and this and that because you know my apartment's protected. So I'll definitely be looking at that and encourage anyone you know watching this to kind of look at that as well.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah. Go ahead. Oh, I was going to say, I mean, yeah, it's always important, you know, if you're concerned about your specific situation, I would say definitely consult an attorney. Just to speak, you know, from my husband and I are homeowners, and my husband actually works for himself as well, and we both work with sole proprietorships. I mean, we both have our professional liability insurance in place, and I can't say that we've actually consulted an attorney about whether we should incorporate, but I have consulted other accountants, and I don't, for us at this point, it's not worth the trouble to incorporate or become an LLC for either of us.
yeah.
But again, I think that's a lot. I think that it's something that can be evaluated on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, and I've seen it the other way around where an individual can own real estate and put the real estate in the LLC. And the LLC, okay, you have your initial, you know, attorney's fees just setting up the entity, but it's not going to be generating any income. So you don't have a tax return associated with that LLC. So you don't have that annual expense to have to pay an accountant to do the tax return. But yet you have that asset protection by having the real estate held in an LLC. but then you would do your business separate from the real estate and truly be separate on your own. So it's a subtle difference, I realize, but it's like, it's the other way around. It's having the real estate in the LLC as opposed to you in the LLC.
Right. Really interesting. And I forget who so, I mean, I remember going to SCORE. I went to SCORE right before I was trying to figure out how do I incorporate and which do I want. And I know I left there being like, oh, I'm going to be filed for my LLC. So I don't know if that was just information that I got misinformation from a retired entrepreneur who, but I also, have been going to the same CPA for years and years. And so I think that was something that he might have said as well. But I want to get to Dallas's question before we wrap up. So Dallas says, in 2 minutes, is there anything major that will change or anything I need to be on top of with the introduction of the Affordable Health Care Act? That relates to taxes and accounting.
That's a hot topic.
Are we out of right? Are we out of your wheelhouse? I'm trying to figure out how this relates to you guys.
Well, basically, tax preparers are sort of the gatekeeper for this. It's not that it's not a tax that is imposed as an income tax, but it's more like a penalty that is assessed if you don't cover yourself appropriately. The rules are actually a little bit complex. I mean, you have to look at, poverty levels, and if you're below, it's a poverty level. Below a certain income, you're exempt from, or you would get subsidized health care, or, you'd be entitled to a subsidy from the government, all the way through small businesses, meaning like, small, medium business, like a 50-person firm or company that would have to provide health insurance or benefits to their employees, but that was postponed, I think, 1 year or 2 years, just recently in the past 2 weeks. Congress, I think, postponed that particular provision. But in 2 minutes, impossible. I mean, it's one of those things where, yes, definitely you should speak to someone about your specific situation to make sure that you're covered.
Yeah, she was just saying that there was a hint on the H&R Block website that I would need to change things, and it perplexed me.
Yeah, I mean, if you have health insurance, there's nothing to worry about. But basically, what we're going to start seeing are these things called exchanges. Just exchanges. Every state will have their own exchange where you can go on and look for, the best deal for healthcare, right? And presumably that's going to promote better pricing, and everyone's going to be able to afford it, right? But everyone has their own situation, so it'd be impossible to just give a blanket answer, unfortunately.
Great. We are like right up at the top of the hour, and I feel like this is a fantastic place to end. Thank you both so much for taking the time and being here and sharing your story and answering these questions. I want to encourage everyone to go visit Hannah at hannahbrandt.com, right? And Anne's site will be up at annelewiscpa.com. I'm at whenigrowupcoach.com, and you can find out more about Grown Up Gigs, which I do every month here on Spreecast, at whenigrowupcoach.com/GUG. Everyone have a wonderful, wonderful night. Thank you again so much for being here. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.